All right, it is still 6:30 p.m. and I'd like to call this meeting of the Community Development Committee to order. While this meeting is being held in person, we are also offering the option for the public to participate through Zoom if preferred. Instructions on how to attend virtually are included in the City Council calendar item listed on the front page of missionks.org. The public is also invited to participate in the meeting. If you are participating through Zoom, please either add your comment in the chat feature and it will be read out loud, or note that you would like to speak and we will call on you shortly to make your comment verbally. Please remember, your comments or questions are visible to everyone in the meeting. If you are part of our in-person group tonight, please raise your hand but stay seated and we will call on you to go to the lectern to make your comment. When you make your comment, please state your name and city of residence for the record. Also, please be conscientious of others trying to speak and speak slowly and clearly. All public comments are limited to 3 minutes. This meeting will be recorded and posted on the city's website at missionks.org. Please contact the administration offices at 913-676-8350 with any questions or concerns. Ms. Folks, please call the roll.
Haden, Chomphosy.
Here.
Wiltinghouse.
Here.
Bowden. Here. Ryherd.
Here.
Singh. Here. Schmidt.
Here.
Josie.
Here.
All right, thank you. Our first item of business tonight is public comment. Is there any member of the public who would like to comment now on an item not on our agenda tonight? Please note public comments are limited to 3 minutes. Seeing none, we'll move on to the Planning Commission action items. We don't have any items coming forward from the Planning Commission or public presentations. Therefore, we will move into our action items. We have one action item tonight this evening for the acceptance of the meeting minutes from Robin Folks.
Yes, thank you. Draft minutes of the September 4th Community Development Committee meeting are included for review and acceptance in your packet tonight.
Thank you. Any comments or recommendation? Thank you.
Recommend consent.
And that concludes our action items. We have one discussion item this evening, an update on the family adoption program from Penn Almany and Laura Smith.
Yes, thank you. As you know, we've been talking for the last couple of months about potential changes or modifications to our family adoption program. I think Councilmember Davis, who couldn't be with us this evening, serves as a liaison to that committee and has expressed, I think it was our July committee meeting, put together a PowerPoint presentation and just sort of looked at some sustainability issues, some other things that maybe if we want to continue this or how we could continue this program, which has been very successful over many, many years and has grown exponentially over many, many, many years. And I think part of that was driven by, concerns about kind of this core group of volunteers that has been with the program for so many years and not kind of cultivating or developing necessarily a group that might want to come along behind and take on some of those things. I think also from her perspective, considering the space and resource needs that it takes from staff and the building at the community center, and how does that align with our goals and objectives coming out of the feasibility study recommendations from last year. So one of the things we had a fairly robust discussion at committee the last time we talked about this. We went back, we talked with Family Adoption Committee. We actually developed a survey that went to the social workers at the school. That was a key. I think you'll remember Kathy Lockard spoke at the committee meeting talking about how valuable that those social workers are, what a resource they are. So we had everybody completed the survey. We included those survey results in your packet. And I just wanted to hit a couple of things. We've shared those with the Family Adoption Committee at their last meeting. We've talked about some change. I think we're looking this evening for maybe some additional direction. Change is hard and moving away from the way we've always done things and maybe just some even clearer direction that we can take back that Director Almany and I can take back to the family adoption program. So a couple of things. One of the other things that we've benefited from the last several years is the breweries, particularly Rock Creek Brewing Company the last several years donating tip revenues. We were unsure even the last time that the Family Adoption Committee met as to whether we would be a recipient of those tips for 2024. They have indicated that we would be. And so that's a benefit. But again, that was, I think, 40%, 60%, about 60% of the revenue that we brought in 2023, and thinking about the potential to lose that also then places some tremendous fundraising obligations. So we're pleased to sort of check that box and know that we have that resource going into 2024. We also started off the year, or we'll started off this year with about $12,000 in the bank carryover. So I won't go through all of the survey page by page because there are other things that people are interested in this evening. But I think some of the feedback that was really eye-opening and I think beneficial from the social workers was that, you know, one of the questions we asked was, how strongly do you think the families feel about these traditional meals that we give at Thanksgiving and Christmas? And interestingly enough, they felt like the Thanksgiving meal was much more meaningful than perhaps the Christmas meal. So I think the preliminary discussion at the committee would be, let's focus on that, giving that kind of that turkey traditional Thanksgiving meal, maybe not all of the other food that accompanies that. Also providing information and resources on food pantries in the area that are available year round for our families. And then potentially doing a concerted effort to actually do a drive for people to donate, you know, $20 get you a turkey or something like that. Because I know we were able to secure the turkeys through harvesters last year, and we're unsure about whether their resources are just becoming more scarce as well. We talked about, the council had a lot of conversation around the use of gift cards for food, particularly at Christmas. And I think we will be transitioning to that. The challenge there is, and we asked the social workers to sort of tell us a range based on family size, and $250 for a family of 4 seemed to be sort of a meaningful amount that they came back with. The challenge there is if we don't start to narrow the total number of families that we're serving, we almost triple the budget that would be required just to do the food gift cards. So we've had some conversations. We did ask the social workers about limiting potentially to Mission and Roland Park families, which, if you'll recall from our conversation in July, would have taken us from about 100 families to, I think, 30 total. The feedback that we had from the social workers, they expressed some concern about that, simply from the perspective that that may not allow them to feel like the neediest families in their school communities are the ones being served. So I think the conversation really needs to focus on bringing that number down. The committee was sort of edging back up towards 80. I think from a staff perspective, we would like to maybe try to cap that closer to 60, if that would be amenable. And then really looking with the families and the social workers to try to make sure that we are truly serving those most in need. Interestingly enough, I was at the Education Foundation breakfast this morning, and Santa Fe Trail principal said, "What are you doing? What are you doing? Have you made any decisions about the family adoption program?" And she said, "You know, I know we don't have very many mission kids at our school, but we, you know, being where we are in Overland Park, we sort of feel like we're forgotten, and this is really a tremendous benefit for our families." We talked some about rearranging the application form. Interestingly enough, you know, as I have been to several of the family adoption committee meetings, they talk about this is for the kids. We're doing this for the kids, but we lead on the application with the gifts for the adults. So we're going to do some simple things like rearranging that, prioritizing the kids at the top of the application. Again, I think that the committee members have done a good job over the last couple of years and really sort of narrowing. You know, it's not these extensive ask for the moon kind of wish list, trying to manage that. We'll continue to work around those things. I think we're going to look at, can we do a bigger push to look at businesses or other organizations who might adopt whole families? We have several who do that already, but being able to, you know, kind of incentivize or encourage people to take a whole family will also sort of help with that. And then one of the things we asked the social workers was whether the families that are participating in our program are also participating, if they're aware that they're also participating in other programs like the Johnson County Christmas Bureau. They indicated that they were. We're going to add a question to the application for this year, making it clear that it doesn't preclude anyone from being considered for our program, but I think that will help us make decisions going forward about where we might have opportunities for partnerships or collaboration. Did I miss anything? Okay. So be happy to answer any questions, but that's kind of the direction we're at that. Oh, and this, we did have 2 social workers who expressed an interest in being members of the Family Adoption Committee. So I think having that voice on a regular basis at the committee meeting will be beneficial as we think about the program moving forward. Questions, comments, thoughts?
Debbie?
I just have a question. How did the committee respond to your changes that we're looking at? The committee is, pretty set in stone, and I understand that, you can't always change, and I get that, but I want to know what their perspective was, because when it comes to the day, they are there. They're kind of
Right.
running it as far as I'm concerned.
No, I think that they acknowledged that some of the challenges that we've identified are real. And that if we want to continue doing this and serving the community in some way, that we're going to have to make changes. As I said, I think the biggest issue that we had in the conversations, and Penn, you can add to this, was really around the number of families. I mean, they would take anybody and everybody who came through the door. So I think limiting the number of families is going to be the most challenging, because we kind of threw out this number of 60, and then it kind of got to 70, and then what if we pushed it to 80? And so I think just from a financial standpoint, and again, at that time, we didn't know if we were going to have the Rock Creek contributions. So I think that's going to be part of kind of that challenge, but I think they're committed in terms of continuing the work to try to be really efficient and effective in the number of gifts and the type of gifts that we're providing, and looking at other resources. So I think, again, change is difficult, but
Thanksgiving I think that's great. That was one of the best things that came out of it, as far as I'm concerned, because
yeah,
Christmas people are gone, and it's totally
Yeah.
different than Thanksgiving. Thanks. Lynn.
I think Trent.
Thanks. So just to clarify what you're asking of us tonight, is the feedback period closed and you're simply sharing like what the survey results were, or are you also soliciting from council like directions or changes?
I think the direction that we heard in July was, let's really try to transition to gift cards for food. And at that point, we didn't know. Let's ask the social workers whether it's one or both. I think based on the feedback, we would say, let's do food at Thanksgiving and transition to gift cards. So looking for, I think, consensus or validation. And we've really kind of communicated that was the council's objective to the committee. And then I think really looking for that direction of, we feel like financially or feasibly, we could, support 60 families. As opposed to 80. I mean, I think we've just got to scale it back further, and that's still double the number of Mission and, Roland Park families in total. So I think the challenge is, this is typically the time by the end of October when we would get the application forms. We actually, I think, had a good conversation at the last meeting and walking through the changes to the application form. They seem to be very receptive to that. But this is the end of this month would typically be when we would send those out to the schools and the social workers and ask them to start collecting that information and get it back to us.
Do we have a copy online of that application form and what it looks like since you've modified?
We haven't modified it yet. It's sitting on my desk with marked up, but I'll be happy to share that out once we make those changes.
And so from the survey questions, is there still an outstanding question on if we're limiting to just Mission and Roland Park families, or are we saying we're going to include without preference to geographical location?
I think the recommendation would be, based on the feedback from the social workers, that we don't limit it at this point to Mission and Roland Park. That we rely on the social workers to help us identify those in their communities who would most benefit from the program.
I think Ben had. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, if we're able to get to a situation where, especially for the Christmas event, we're not doing gifts and food, I think that's probably a significant streamlining, and that I think is the aim of what we're hoping to see based on what we've heard. That are the challenges, is just being more efficient with time and money. And I don't think, given what we gave as sort of direction from the council the last time we spoke about it, I'm certainly happy to hear what's good, what's bad, what the social workers think versus, what we were thinking. So happy to take their lead on that kind of stuff and just go with the flow in terms of finding the places where it's easiest to push just efficiency that doesn't take away from the program. So I appreciate that you and the social workers and the committee have been able to suss that out to some degree. I think that's
And I think after the council's last conversation, I believe Juliana did a story in the Post, and we interestingly enough had a couple of people who reached out to us as we were talking about kind of the space. And I think Councilmember Loudon talked about space that your organization has used for maybe some similar programs. But as we kind of investigated that, it was almost creating more inefficiency for the staff time that we are dedicating to the program to have to go offsite to do some of that. So I think, again, streamlining, reducing the impact on the facility potentially with just the gifts at Christmas are some good changes for this year. And then certainly we'll continue to evaluate that.
great. Thanks.
That's all I had. Thank you.
All right. And before we adjourn, Ms. Smith, are there any department updates for the Community Development Committee?
No, I
Nope. Okay. It is now 6:46, and with no further discussion, that concludes the meeting of the Community Development Committee. Again, this video will be made public on our website at missionks.org. Thank you.
Maybe a break. Yeah. Restroom, stand up, take a stretch. No? All right, let's go. It is now 6:46 PM, and I'd like to call this meeting of the Finance and Administration Committee to order. While this meeting is being held in person, we are also offering the option for the public to participate through Zoom if preferred. Instructions on how to attend virtually are included in the City Council calendar item listed on the front page of missionks.org. The public is also invited to participate in the meeting. If you are participating through Zoom, please either add your comment in the chat feature and it will be read out loud, or note that you would like to speak and we will call on you shortly to make your comment verbally. Please remember your comments or questions are visible to everyone in the meeting. If you are part of our in-person group tonight, please raise your hand but stay seated and we will call on you to go to the lectern to make your comment. When you make your comment, please state your name and city of residence for the record. Also, be conscientious of others trying to speak and speak slowly and clearly. This meeting will be recorded and posted on the city's website at missionks.org. Please contact the administration offices at 913-676-8350 with any questions or concerns. Ms. Folks, please call the roll.
Haden,
Here.
Boltinghouse,
Here.
Loudon. Here. Ryherd.
Here.
Spring.
Here.
Schmidt.
Here.
Josie.
Here.
Our first item of business tonight is public comment. Is there any member of the public who would like to comment now on an item not on our agenda tonight? Please note, public comments are limited to 3 minutes. I do not see anyone. Is there anyone online? No. All right, we will move on. We do not have any items from the Planning Commission or public presentations this evening. Therefore, we will move into our action items. Our first action item this evening is for consideration of a resolution calling for a public hearing to consider a TIF redevelopment project plan for the property located at 5665 Foxridge from Laura Smith.
Thank you. I would actually ask or invite Kevin Wimpy with Gilmore and Bell to come up and kind of talk with you all about some of the procedure. This is really a procedural step in just setting and calling a date and a time for a public hearing on the project, but it's a little bit different than what we've done in the past. So Kevin, if you would.
Sure thing. Yeah. Thanks, Laura. Good evening, everyone. Kevin Wimpy with Gilmore and Bell, the city's bond counsel, joined tonight with my colleague, Chanel Perez as well. This group, we've had the occasion recently to talk TIF, and some of you are wearing jerseys, and I understand there's a sporting event tonight, so I'll be very conscientious of your time. We'll do the abbreviated version and sort of highlight the procedural elements and the difference here. Laura mentioned. So the quick refresher on TIF, as you all know, is it's a tool that allows capture of assessed valuation growth of a project, and that growth and value, those funds can be captured in the TIF fund and used to reimburse eligible costs of a project. And with TIF, that's generally site prep, parking, horizontal infrastructure, and that type of thing. It's a lengthy process to go from day zero to approval of a TIF plan. Very intense process with notices, resolutions, publications, and so forth. But it really boils down to two steps from the council's perspective. And step one is establishing the TIF district, and at that time adopting a district plan. And then step two, after that occurs, is adopting a project plan. So to jump to tonight and next week's action on your agenda will be a resolution calling a public hearing for your November meeting. The developer here in this case at 5665 Foxridge is proposing a multifamily project and using pay-as-you-go TIF, meaning no bonds will be issued, and instead the developer will front the project costs. TIF funds will be captured over time and used to reimburse the developer. Now, this site's probably familiar to many of you because a TIF district was in fact established in 2017, at that time anticipating a senior living facility. And so what makes this different from some of the recent TIF projects you've seen is that we have an established TIF district. Step one of adopting a district plan has occurred. And there's a mechanism under the TIF Act, the statutes that require that when a substantial change to a district plan occurs, you have to repeat the same notice and hearing procedure as was required to adopt the district. Those steps are identical to step two of adopting a TIF plan. And so those steps will follow on identical timeline and be heard at your November meeting. So again, two things we will accomplish at that meeting would be public hearings on substantial change to the district plan of basically converting from a senior living facility to a multifamily project. And then two is adoption or consideration of a TIF plan, which you know from recent projects is more specific to the project and includes a lot more of the substance that you're used to seeing. Alongside that, we'll also be working on a development agreement with the developer that'll set forth the business terms of the deal. And as Laura mentioned, we'll have several upcoming dates where we'll get more into the details of that as it develops. So again, next week's item sets that public hearing. It'll trigger the notices to go from the clerk's office to property owners, other taxing jurisdictions, publications in the newspaper, and set us up to take action next month. With that, I'll stop and answer any questions you might have.
Yeah, go ahead.
Can you define, Kevin, the difference between a project-specific TIF and the district TIF, like the parameters? Because the parameters of this are around this specific project, but we're considering it a district. Can you tell me what would go outside the parameter if it's a district? Because this is just project-specific.
Correct. Yeah, council members. So in this case, we have one district and one project area that have the same exact boundaries. So I know we have districts throughout the city that have multiple project areas, which is permitted under the statute. But the map you see is the exhibit to the resolution is one parcel, and it's the district and the project area that are coterminous. Is that answer your question or?
So if there was another parcel over here that wanted to apply for TIF under similar scenario, it would be another district established? It's more like a project specific than a district. If it were a district, to me, it seems like it would be a bit broader, but.
Oh, I understood. So, correct. Yeah. If there was an adjacent parcel that was interested in TIF, they would have to approach and go through the entire procedure to establish a TIF district, which requires an eligibility finding and all the things that you've seen from step one of a district. The part of the underlying reasoning for drawing the district the way they do is that's the parcel that the developer owns and will develop on. And that's where the eligible costs can be incurred and be reimbursed with TIF. So it is just focused on the one parcel, I guess is the answer.
So typically, if a developer is looking at a larger project, they would assemble those parcels. And at the time they're making application for consideration of establishment of the district, they would include all of those at one time. And so again, as Mr. Wempe said, the developer is looking at what they are either purchasing or what they own.
Yeah, Ben, go ahead.
Can you just real quick go over what exactly entitlements the developer receives if a project plan is established, is accepted by the council? Like what do they get from that, and what planning steps remain in terms of the financial side of things?
Sure. So I think it'd be helpful to distinguish TIF plan from development agreement. I know we typically, and this is the case most places, those are adopted alongside one another. You're considering a development agreement and a TIF plan under the same ordinance. In a TIF plan, the biggest legal effect is that it starts the 20-year clock for TIF. So you have a maximum of 20 years to collect those TIF funds and spend them on the project. And really that's the effect of the TIF plan, is describing what's being constructed and sort of checking the boxes under the statute and then triggering your 20-year clock. It's typical for the development agreement then separately to set aside the business terms of the deal. And for instance, the portion of the TIF that the developer would get, any caps on reimbursement, if the city would share in any of the TIF funds or have TIF uses for those other TIF funds. So I guess to think of it in two different buckets. One, the TIF plan is really a statutory step that describes some of the high level details of the project and begins the TIF clock. And then under the development agreement is where the really the business terms and the business deal struck between the developer and the city reside.
And I think the other
makes
thing with the
sense.
TIF project plan is there is that requirement that the planning commission evaluate the project in association with the comprehensive plan and find it in conformance with that.
Mhm.
So that piece of the plan. And so I've over the years thought about it. You establish the district, you funnel it down to a project plan, which is still often very vague and
Mhm.
sort of nebulous. And then by the time we get to a development agreement, we've, picked out potentially what costs. So not all the costs necessarily shown in a TIF project plan, as TIF eligible reimbursement costs might ultimately be reimbursed through a redevelopment agreement. But that's where we would then include things related to sustainability, attainable housing, any of the other community benefits that the council might be interested in looking at.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? I do not see any. Can I get it?
Very quickly, I know Curtis Holland with Pulsinelli representing the developer is here. If you had any questions for him, and I would just say, again, this is the resolution that would set the date for that public hearing. You can take action on the same night of the public hearing, or similarly, like the Lanes Phase 2 project, we opened the public hearing at one meeting, didn't have all the information available, continued that. So this sort of gets that clock started and gets the process started. We are targeting a October 30th work session on this project, where we hope to be able to kind of come back and present the financial analysis from Mr. Kimmel and whatever deal points we've been able to negotiate or need to continue to negotiate, so that we have that opportunity in advance of your November committee meeting and then the public hearing.
Noting that, does anyone else have any other follow-up questions or comments? No? Okay, I'll take, I'm sorry. Yes, that was my next item. Yep, recommendation on this one, please.
Recommend regular agenda.
Oh,
Non-consent.
I assume there will be.
regular it is.
Time. There always is.
Our
may have some.
second action item this evening is for consideration of a contract with Little Government Relations for 2025 legislative advocacy services, also from Laura Smith.
Yes, thank you. So since 2020, we have contracted with Little Government Relations, or LGR, Stuart Little, for government affairs and advocacy services. He and his colleague Mallory Lutz provide weekly updates during the legislative session, monthly updates throughout the course of the year, assistance with crafting both our legislative program and any testimony that we might wish to submit. And I think it's been very helpful to have that really timely and relevant information throughout the course of the legislative session without having to dedicate staff going to Topeka or being tuned into that. So we're recommending renewal of an agreement with LGR in an amount not to exceed $12,500 for these services. Although that is now within my new expenditure authority. In conversation with the mayor, she felt like it was important that we bring this forward and still just be very transparent about who we're contracting with for legislative advocacy services. So you may recall that for the first several years of the contract, there was no price increase. LGR asked for and the council approved an increase from 10,000 to 12,500 last year. And they're proposing to hold the contract amount constant for 2025.
Thank you. Any questions, Brent?
I was just gonna say, I appreciate their efforts on our behalf and the information they give us. They seem level-headed and very good with delivering complete information at the level that we need it. And certainly appreciate, the conduit that we have to, when we set our legislative priorities to communicate those to the state and do so in a way, along with some of the other communities around us to look out for our interests here. So I think it's a very reasonable price for what we get, and I'm happy to support it. Make a recommendation if anybody else.
I agree. I'd recommend consent on this.
The only other comment I had is I had just recently put together that these were the ones who helped compile the legislative updates for us. and
Yes.
I always find those fascinating to read. So
Yes.
very helpful.
And so just a typical timeline, we've kind of advanced this in the course of the year. So I would imagine in November, we will come back with kind of a draft legislative program and priorities for you all to review and discuss, finalize that at your December council meeting, and then it will be ready to make available to our legislators prior to the start of the 2025 session.
And I'm sorry, I missed it. Consent was the recommendation? Yes, okay. Our next action item this evening is the acceptance of the meeting minutes from Robin Folks.
All right, thank you. Draft minutes of the September 4th Finance and Administration Committee meeting have been included for review and acceptance in your packet tonight.
Did anyone have any corrections or comments or thoughts on the minutes? Nope. Consent on that one? All right. Our next action item tonight is for consideration of the 2024 STO and UPOC adoption from Chief Dan Madden.
Good evening. This is the annual renewal of the standard traffic ordinance and uniform public offense code books. Those are what via ordinance gives officers the mechanism to charge people with the offenses and violations that are listed within. So every year there are some minor changes, and just I won't go over all of them, but just there's a few that I wanted to point out in the Uniform Public Offense Code. The disorderly conduct was amended slightly due to a Kansas Supreme Court decision to remove the noisy conduct provision. And in an effort to encourage mostly opioid related overdoses, but they included all of the other drugs essentially in the drug section. They eliminated, or they included a provision that would not allow an officer to take somebody into custody if they're requesting medical assistance for an overdose or similar related, which will I think the hope is to encourage people to contact emergency services when they're around somebody that's experiencing an overdose or might think they are as well. In the standard traffic ordinance, the major change is the failure to comply with a traffic citation. That eliminated several violations that were previously eligible for suspension of a driver's license. And so that takes away some of those things that kind of would keep people from being able to drive, and hopefully good move for that. That's these books go into effect when the new laws go into effect, which is July 1st. This one is the only exception in the statute. It doesn't go into effect until January 1st of 2025, but it'll still be included in this book because it's included with for the year. And then every year we look through and see if there's ordinances that we prefer to have our own language in, and there are several that we do, and that includes maximum speed limits in the standard traffic ordinance, as well as fines related to school zones. And in the Uniform Public Offense Code, we have our own smoking restrictions and animal cruelty and dangerous animals. We feel like the animal ones specifically are better. Our language better suits the needs of a more urban environment, whereas the animal cruelty in the UPOC book tends to focus a lot on rural communities, things that we typically, hopefully, don't deal with very often. So, those are the major changes, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Chief. Any questions from the public or the committee? None? I'll take a recommendation.
I'll recommend consent on this.
Consent it is. Our fifth action item tonight is for consideration of an MOU. Sorry, anything that we need to stop for? No. With Johnson County for EV charging stations in Mission from Justin Carroll.
The stupid Yankees scored a run, so that's.
Oh, no, that's worth pausing. Yeah.
So in the spirit of being brief, this is an MOU, as noted for the city to fund 2 EV stations at Broadmoor Park and at Powell Community Center. You might recall this is actually an item that first appeared last year during the budget process. It was originally a supplemental that was then ultimately included in the budget. And so where we're at with that process now is with this MOU, the county is the primary agent for this. So they are the ones, they're going to be the main point of contact and kind of running the show on this. And they are going to start design and everything in early 2025, and the ball will really get rolling at that point. So the goal is it'll be 32 stations installed throughout the county with Johnson County entities, as well as some other of our neighboring cities and stuff participating. And so this just gets us signed up for that so that we can keep the process moving on that.
Thank you. I see. Yeah, Debbie.
The charging stations are really expensive. Is that standard? Have we gone out? Is it just not many companies are building them, or what, why are they so expensive?
It's a two-part that goes into the cost. It's not just the charging stations themselves, but it's also the construction and everything. And so getting the conduit and the actual infrastructure there is part of those costs as well that go into that total. And so it can, depending on, you can see it in the attachment, and you'll see it varies with the different, you can see some pretty big swings in some of those estimates because it just depending on the location. Like if you've got a bore under a parking lot or stuff like that, that's what can really raise the cost on that.
So it could be less on each one based on where it is, or is that the threshold?
These are the currently estimated costs. I will say until the county they're in the middle of the RFP process for the vendor that's going to do the contractor, and then they'll get into official design. So those costs could fluctuate slightly once they pick the vendor and everything. We have
It's just east of the, so where the Circle Drive is right now, it's right there in that, sorry.
Go ahead. Thank you.
Where the parking lot and the Circle Drive meet, it's going to be in that section. So ideally it'd be that first parking spot that would tie into it.
Yeah.
Just something I always like to nudge when we talk about parking in our parks is that maybe have the PRT think about how, the interaction between our, no parking overnight rules and things interact with people wanting to use that charging station. Just something to think of before we run into problems with it, generally in support.
Any other questions or comments? Nope. I'll take a recommendation on this one.
And we take it regular agenda consent, but you might want to bring it up. It's kind of interesting, I think. So I don't.
I'm okay with regular agenda.
Regular?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Justin. Let's see, that was our last action item. We do not have any discussion items this evening. No, we do. Did I miss it? What is it?
Surplus equipment.
I'm sorry. Yep. Our final action item tonight is for consideration of a declaration of surplus equipment, also from Justin Carroll.
Fun, generally biannual perfunctory item, just the declaration of surplus property. So back again for doing that for 2024. You've got the full list of property there. I just think of note the big numbers on there. So if you recall, we passed the item earlier for all of the new PCs and everything. And so this is kind of the closing the loop on that. So we've done that. Everyone's got the new machines. And so it's to get rid of, the big part of this is getting rid of all that old equipment.
Any questions or comments from the public or committee? No? Recommendation on this?
Recommend consent.
Consent it is. That was our final action item. Still do not have any discussion items this evening. Ms. Smith, are there any department updates for the Finance and Administration Committee?
I don't believe so. Just a reminder that we'll have our council legislative meeting next Wednesday at 7. We moved this one to accommodate the holiday, and so we'll be back on track in November.
Okay, great. If nothing else,
Just a reminder for the Ward 4 meeting tomorrow night at 7 o'clock at the community center. Hope to see lots of people there, and the letters that we sent out have been very well received. I don't know if you've heard feedback, but I've gotten several folks that have emailed or spoken to me and said, great idea. So thank you very much for your help with that, everybody.
Any other comments? No? Okay. It is now 7:10 PM, and with no further discussion, that concludes the meeting of the Finance and Administration Committee. Again, this video will be made public on our website at missionks.org. Thank you.